What happens when a team finally admits they've built the wrong way, and the vultures start circling their best bargain? There's a particular kind of frustration, bordering on fury, that comes with watching a franchise realize too late that they've constructed a roster destined for mediocrity. The Vancouver Canucks have finally opened their eyes, acknowledged the uncomfortable truth, and hoisted the white flag on their veteran core. They want to get younger. They want to rebuild on the fly. And now, like sharks detecting blood in Pacific waters, contending teams are swarming around one of the league's most undervalued assets, Kiefer Sherwood. The whispers have become shouts. The Canucks have not so quietly informed the rest of the NHL that they're open for business, and Sherwood, relentless, physical bottom-six winger carrying a laughably team-friendly $1.5 million cap hit, has emerged as one of the hottest commodities on the trade market. Two new teams have reportedly entered the conversation, joining what's becoming an increasingly crowded auction for a player who represents everything playoff teams crave: grit, versatility, affordability, and that intangible motor that never stops running. The asset everyone wants, and the price tag that's raising eyebrows according to insider Rick Dhaliwal. Vancouver isn't asking for the moon. They're reportedly seeking a first-round pick for Sherwood, a request that some might consider aggressive for a bottom-six forward. Yet here's the fascinating wrinkle: at least one team has already indicated the price isn't unreasonable. With several contending franchises holding multiple first-round selections, the market conditions are ripe for Vancouver to actually extract premium value. The question is whether they'll have the backbone to hold firm. Sherwood's appeal is undeniable. At $1.5 million against the cap, one NHL executive reportedly called his contract one of the league's best value deals. For context, that's cheaper than most fourth-liners on playoff rosters, yet Sherwood brings legitimate top-nine capability when needed. He hits, he forechecks with relentless intensity, he can kill penalties, and he provides the kind of sandpaper identity that disappears in the regular season, but becomes absolutely invaluable in April and May. The Boston Bruins and Minnesota Wild are among the early suitors, and it's easy to see why both franchises would covet Sherwood's skill set. Boston, perpetually searching for affordable depth pieces to complement their aging core, needs exactly the kind of energy Sherwood provides. Minnesota, built on defensive structure and grinding hockey, could slot him seamlessly into their bottom six and watch him thrive in Dean Evason's system. But they're not alone. Multiple teams are circling, all recognizing that Sherwood represents a rare combination: impact without cap consequence. In an NHL where every dollar matters and contenders are squeezed against the ceiling, finding a player who contributes meaningfully at $1.5 million is like discovering gold in your backyard. Conor Garland. The tougher sell with the bigger contract, while Sherwood generates buzz, Conor Garland presents a far more complicated puzzle. The diminutive winger has also drawn inquiries, but his situation is vastly different. Garland recently suffered an injury, and more significantly, he's carrying a long-term contract with substantial money remaining. For a Canucks organization desperate to shed salary and get younger, moving Garland requires finding a team willing to absorb both risk and commitment. The market exists, but it's lukewarm. Teams are watching, evaluating, waiting to see if Vancouver becomes desperate enough to retain salary or sweeten the pot with additional assets. Garland possesses skill, his hands and hockey IQ are legitimate, but his size, defensive limitations, and contract make him a much tougher piece to move than the plug-and-play simplicity of Sherwood. It'll take a much stronger offer to pry Garland away, according to reports. And frankly, Vancouver might be better served holding him unless they receive an offer that genuinely improves their future. Trading assets just to trade them is how franchises extend their suffering. Philadelphia enters the chat, but not for what you'd expect here, is where the trade landscape gets particularly intriguing. The Philadelphia Flyers are actively searching the market, and initial speculation suggested they might be targeting a center. That would make sense. Philadelphia's depth down the middle has been inconsistent, and adding a reliable pivot could stabilize their lineup. But Dhaliwal threw cold water on that theory, emphatically stating that if the Flyers are looking for center help, they should look anywhere but Vancouver. Why? Because the Canucks center depth is, to put it charitably, among the worst in the NHL. This is both hilarious and tragic. Vancouver's organizational failure at the center position has been so profound that insiders are openly advising other teams to avoid even asking. It's a damning indictment of roster construction and draft strategy, and it underscores exactly why the Canucks find themselves in this position. Selling off veterans because they failed to build sustainable depth. Instead, Philadelphia's interest likely centers on defense, an area where Vancouver actually has movable pieces. The Flyers need blue line help. And if Vancouver can package a defenseman in a deal that brings back youth or picks, it could represent the kind of smart, forward-thinking move this franchise desperately needs to execute. The broader picture: Vancouver's crossroads step back from the individual names and examine the larger narrative unfolding in Vancouver. This isn't just about trading Kiefer Sherwood or fielding calls on Conor Garland. This is about an organization finally acknowledging that their competitive window has slammed shut and that clinging to veteran players in the vain hope of sneaking into a playoff spot is organizational malpractice. Getting younger isn't just a buzzword. It's survival. The Canucks have spent years trapped in hockey purgatory. Not bad enough to secure elite draft picks, not good enough to genuinely contend. They've mortgaged futures for short-term gains that never materialized. They've handed out contracts that aged poorly before the ink dried. And now they're left with a roster full of veterans whose trade value is evaporating by the week. The decision to open the floodgates and make multiple players available is the right one, perhaps the only one. But execution matters. If Vancouver panics and accepts underwhelming returns because they're desperate to move salary, they'll simply extend their rebuild by years. If they hold firm, extract maximum value, and prioritize draft capital and young assets, they might actually accelerate their path back to relevance. What Sherwood's market tells us about modern NHL economics, Sherwood's burgeoning trade market reveals something crucial about today's NHL. Value contracts are more important than ever. In a flat cap environment where contenders are perpetually squeezed, finding impact players on affordable deals is the difference between depth and desperation. Teams aren't just acquiring Sherwood for what he does on the ice, though his physicality, forechecking, and penalty killing are all legitimate assets. They're acquiring him because his $1.5 million cap hit allows them to add without subtracting elsewhere. He's the rare player who makes a roster better without forcing painful decisions elsewhere. This is why Vancouver must hold out for a first-round pick. Sherwood isn't just a rental. He's cost-controlled, he's versatile, and he addresses needs that every playoff team has. If multiple franchises are interested, the Canucks should leverage that competition and refuse to settle for a second-rounder or mid-tier prospect. The market is there. The value is real. Don't undersell. The emotional weight of watching a franchise dismantle, there's something profoundly melancholy about watching a team admit defeat and begin dismantling the pieces. For Canucks fans who've endured years of false hope and broken promises, this trade deadline represents both relief and resignation. Relief that management finally recognizes reality. Resignation that the path forward is long, uncertain, and littered with the wreckage of poor decisions. Kiefer Sherwood, in many ways, symbolizes what Vancouver could have been: hardworking, affordable, effective. Instead, he'll likely be wearing another team's jersey by March, contributing to someone else's playoff run while the Canucks watch from home and wonder how it all went so wrong. The Bruins and Wild are circling. Other teams are watching. The price is set, or at least it should be. Now comes the hardest part: actually executing the trade without caving to pressure or accepting less than Sherwood is worth. Final thought: don't blink. Vancouver, the Canucks stand at a crossroads. They can either maximize this opportunity, extracting first-round picks, acquiring young assets, and genuinely committing to a rebuild, or they can panic, accept underwhelming returns, and extend their suffering for another half-decade. Kiefer Sherwood is worth a first-round pick. Multiple teams agree. The market supports it. The only question is whether Vancouver's front office has the conviction to hold firm when a general manager inevitably tries to lowball them with a second-rounder and a B-level prospect. Don't blink. Don't settle. And for once, make the smart, patient, forward-thinking decision that this franchise has avoided for far too long. What do you think? Should Vancouver hold out for first-round pick or take the best offer available and move on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as fired up about this trade deadline chaos as we are, smash that like button and let's keep this conversation going.